Welcome to the Uncommon CEO podcast, where we unpack the mindset, skills, and wisdom it takes to become an uncommon leader in a common world. With your host, the Uncommon CEO himself, Andrew Smart.
Welcome, Uncommon CEO podcast, leading into Memorial Day weekend here for us.
Memorial Day weekend is probably one of my most favorite weekends.
Why is that?
Well, it's a special time of year where we truly come together as a nation and recognize and celebrate those who gave their life, for this great land that we live in. I know we celebrate 4th of July. 4th of July is obviously a big holiday and an important holiday because that holiday is all about our independence. It's all about an action step that says that, hey, we've declared we're going to be independent from, obviously British rule. But Memorial Day is when we celebrate all those who gave everything. Every Memorial Day, as long as you've been with me, I always send out a Memorial Day message.
Yeah.
And there's a speech that Ronald Reagan gave on Memorial Day in recognition. And he says that when you look at these men and women, but look at these men, these brave young men who gave up everything. He said, you look at them and you realize that they gave up two lives. Obviously the one that they're living, that they gave up, but they also gave up the life they could have lived.
Sure.
And so it's an incredible sacrifice. And sometimes he says, when we look back, we tend to look back and memorialize the founding fathers, these revered old men. And so you realize that, people who truly sacrificed for this country are often young people.
Oh, yeah. I mean, especially during the draft time period. I mean, kids in a lot of ways.
Through all the wars. I mean, every war this country's ever fought, all the way up to the most recent ones in Afghanistan and Iraq, and obviously in other countries that we don't even know where they're fighting. I mean, they're often young people. These aren't old people fighting; they're young people, and some have young families, some have no. I mean, so you realize that that it's a true sacrifice because they give up more than just that one life he talks about. And so I love the opportunity of Memorial Day to truly recognize and honor those who have given, who have served. I always like to send out a text message to all my friends and family who I know that served, and just tell them how much I appreciate, what they did for all of us. So incredible weekend. Unfortunately, here the weather doesn't look as good as I would normally hope it to be on Memorial Day. Looks like we got a little rain and cool weather coming in.
Fingers crossed. We'll see what happens. I finally got the pool open, so I'm swimming no matter what's happening.
Yeah, I
no
think
matter what's coming out of the sky, I'm getting in that pool.
Yeah, we plan to do a little something probably around the pool. Many times we've been at the lake, but I decided with the weather, we'll skip the lake and take our chances with pool time. So
cool.
But regardless, I'm going to cook something on the grill. So I'm gonna barbecue something.
Yes, same here.
Do you know what you're gonna do?
Well, I like to do ribs. Is usually my Memorial Day special meal that I cook up. Slow roast them and then throw them either on the green egg, or we got a new gas grill not too long ago. So,
okay. Well, I'm a rib kind of guy.
Yep.
Love ribs. And so
I doubt there's any left, but if they are, some might show up with me on Tuesday. So
man, I love ribs. And so I haven't decided what we're going to do, but we will definitely be grilling something and probably have grandparents over and
nice.
And just have a nice, relaxing, good time. So kind of building off of this Memorial Day discussion, I wanted to go into the topic of teachability.
Okay.
Because as you know, as we move to this time of year, we're not just celebrating Memorial Day and the opportunity for summer. We're coming towards the end of the year where many of us who have children, they're kind of wrapping up their school year.
Third grade graduation next week for me. So,
Awesome. Awesome. It's funny with my kids, Claire's in the 6th, she's a rising 7th grader, and Drew's a 7th grader, rising 8th grader. But at their school, Drew has had final exams. And, Claire didn't this year. So she's been loving this last week or two where she didn't have to do the studying and tests that Drew does. And I said, well, your time's coming, dear. And so, but it's really an evaluation. Why do we take exams? I mean, it's an evaluation of what you've learned, right? And if it's done right, and if you've gone through the process throughout the year, the test that you took at the beginning of the year, because you get tested at the beginning of the year, should look a little different than what you take at the end of the year.
Yeah, one would think.
Yeah, I mean, and you want to know that, okay, my knowledge gap expanded, and that hopefully through this whole year I listened to something and I retained it. Yep. And so I had the opportunity just the other night before last, I was helping Drew prepare for his final exam, which is a history exam. I'm pretty good at helping him there.
Sure.
I have a great background in history, degree in history, and I love history. I did not help him on the math.
Sure, yeah. Mine would be the opposite, is where I could actually contribit or not.
It's that I have to lean into his mother and said, here you go. This is on you.
Yeah.
But history I enjoyed. It's so fun when I'm working with Drew or Claire on history. As much as I've studied in history, I'm always learning new things. And sometimes just kind of like, God, yeah, I hadn't studied that in so long. I'm remembering. So I really enjoyed that. Drew's history study is really focused in a lot of Asian history. And it focuses on some World War I, World War II, kind of build up the Soviet Union, how that came to be, transitions from long empires, and so I was like, wow, this is great. But a lot of Asian history, China, Japan, Pacific Islands. So it was fun to go through that and do some quizzing with him, and he was teachable.
Okay, that's always good.
And here's the part: he's done a great job in retention, and so, but why do I want to talk about teachable? It's not just because we come to the end of the year and school year, and hey, are our kids teachable? I find that in life, our growth and who we can become is all about our ability to be teachable.
I'd agree.
Unfortunately, not everybody's teachable.
I've also found that. I know we've always talked about, when I was hired here, teachability was a big focus, and everybody that I brought into the departments I've manned. Teachability is key. You can't have people that aren't willing to learn, or else you're not able to grow.
Yeah, and wanting to teach. So we talk a lot about leadership. This is a leadership podcast. Good and great leaders understand the value of teaching and being teachable. You can't give what you don't have. Okay, if I'm not teachable, meaning like if I can't learn, then I'm going to limit what I can give. And so teachability and and being coachable is critical to leadership. And so in an uncommon leadership podcast, uncommon people are always wanting to learn. I have a mind that loves to learn. Often that's learning from other people. It can be learning from books. It can be just learning from the experiences you go through life, but learning. I want to gain knowledge, and knowledge grabbing should be a lifelong journey.
Sure.
And so, but going back to teachable, I had a high school coach, pretty tough guy. He didn't say I always agree with things with him, but I did listen to him. He was a former football player at Clemson too. He played center at Clemson, but he was a high school coach, and he says, that I'm going to teach you, meaning I'm going to coach you as long as you'll let me coach you. And literally, that mentality is I can coach you as long as you're willing to listen and learn. And so I took that into my mind that that the moment that I become uncoachable is the moments that I no longer am going to be able to be capable to perform at the level that I want to perform in this sport. So I need to always keep a mental mind of coachability and teachability. And so teachability, Matt, do you consider yourself to be someone who always wants to learn?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm always learning, trying to hone my skills and then new skills. I like to say I read a lot. I don't read a lot of books, but I definitely read a lot. I'm always constantly trying to find little bits and pieces to broaden my mind.
Well, the word competence, when I throw that word out, what immediately comes to your mind?
Whether somebody is fit, competence can be job. It can be, some people are not competent to have children, really. I mean, there's
a lot of people that aren't
kind
competent
of,
to have children.
you know, fit to have the skill set to execute a certain task is where I see competence.
You know, when I look at competence versus mental capacity, okay, I know a lot of people who are relatively competent. But what I've also found in a lot of people is a lack of mental capacity to grow beyond that. And I think that, in the mind, one, competent is important, okay? When we look at business and in leadership, you really don't want to be led by someone who's not competent. That's a scary place to be. It's what you just said. People who aren't competent having children, okay? That's a scary thing. And it happens every day, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But you want to be led by someone who is competent and it's kind of like confidence, okay? If you're in a tough situation, if you're whatever it is, business, personal, it doesn't matter. If you're in a tough situation, do you want to be surrounded by people with competence and confidence?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because the alternative is really scary.
Yeah, if you're not, and we've gone through this in previous podcasts, if your leader isn't confident and inspires confidence, you've got a room full of scared people and a room full of people that can't execute to their fullest potential. It loosens your competence when you don't have confidence.
Well, so what I know as a confident person is that I know that from my position, while I might be strong in these areas, I know that I need to keep working to build strength. I don't think it's by coincidence that that God designed us with 2 ears and 1 mouth.
True.
And just the fact it's 2 against 1 says a lot.
Yeah, you should be using these ones more than this one, when you can.
How many times have you heard me say we all want to be heard?
Yeah, one of my favorite, I don't know if it's a quote or not, but the amount of people that are, instead of listening, formulating what they're going to say next is just all too common.
Yeah. And so it tells us right out the gate that we need to listen more. We need to prioritize listening. We need to prioritize getting information. Obviously evaluating that information. Because if we do that by the time that we deliver information, we're going to be better. We're going to deliver something that is more thoughtful, more meaningful, and is going to lead us in a better way. So teachability has to first start with one's ability to listen. It's like we're talking about our kids, okay? Often teachers, one of the many things that they battle is classroom management, okay? Classroom management. Well, hey, when you've got young kids, okay, it's hard to manage adults. I lead adults every day.
Yeah.
It's hard to sit there in a board meeting, in a group meeting, PIP meetings. Okay, I'm managing personalities of adults all day long. I honestly think sometimes kids are a lot easier.
Yeah.
I'm not saying every teacher would agree with that, but sometimes I feel that way because all I've got sometimes I feel like is a lot older kids.
Yeah. I think it's just the number of kids at once. I can't imagine trying to guide 28 children at the same time.
It takes a lot of energy.
Yeah, my wife's a teacher, so yes, I know all about it.
Married one of those too, so I know all about it too. But what I know as a teacher, the teacher is, when they're talking about classroom management, they're focusing in on them paying attention and listening, getting the information. Okay, kids are going through school. They know that process. When we get to be adults, then, we get, little, quote, more freedoms of action and independence, that we don't always follow that. And so I think to be a person who can become the best person they want to be, they have to understand the value of always being teachable.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got some quotes that I wanted to put out here. John Wooden, who I love John Wooden.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, famous coach. Unfortunately, he's passed away and gone on, but who he is and what he did still lives on today.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to talk about a coach who was always teaching teachability? I mean, you go back and you look at, how he coached and who he coached. That's why he developed guys who not only become great players, they became great coaches themselves.
Yep.
And so teachability, he goes on to say, it's what you learn after you know it all that counts.
That's interesting. Yeah. That's continued growth. You never stop learning.
Yeah. He says, what you learn. So the moment you think you're a know-it-all, you're done. It's what you learn after you know. And so another quote I got is by Henry David Thoreau. It takes two to speak the truth, one to speak and one to hear.
Okay.
Pretty profound, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Two to speak the truth. And so that goes into the whole point of teachability. Hey, someone has to be able to speak into you. I mean, and so I value someone being able to speak into me. So I want to go into going back to the manual, the greatest book that I know called the Bible. And I've always said, hey, this is a leadership book, an uncommon leadership book. It's full of uncommon people who do a lot of uncommon things. And so one of the great stories that I love in the Bible on teachability is Elijah and Elijah. Okay. And that story is about a younger guy coming along with this older kind of mentor teacher and wanting to do nothing but follow and listen and learn to this guy. And so, what he knew and what I love about this story, in 10 years of basically this one guy following another guy, one of the only things that he really did the whole 10 years was?
Listen.
Is carry water.
Oh, yep.
Everywhere he went, he carried water and listened to the other guy speak. And at the whole time, he's sitting back, listening, doing this job, carrying this water, having this responsibility. He's gaining information. He's being taught by watching and learning, but not speaking. Now Elijah would go on to have this incredible ministry and impact tons of people. Okay? Now, at the moment of his kind of death and moving on, Elijah, he's moving on. And Elijah's like, hey, I want to go with you. You're going this way. I want to go with you. And he says, no, you're to stay here. You have followed me. You have listened. You learned. You've done your job. Now it's your time to teach. And they say that his ministry went on to be 50 times greater than the other guys. Now, I think that's a profound thing. Okay, he follows this great mentor, but ends up having a ministry 50 times greater than his mentor. How and why does that happen, Matt?
Well, he learned from somebody else and applied it to his strengths. He may have had it within him all along, but having that guidance, taking the time to listen allowed him to become even stronger because of it.
He gained everything this guy had to offer, but guess what? Then he was able to not just regurgitate, not just become the same thing, he was able to build on it. And that's really how it should work. It's I mean, when we talk about former Bulls and LA coach Phil Jackson.
Yeah.
Okay, Phil Jackson was a student of John Wooden's. He was a player and student of John Wooden's. Okay, what did Phil Jackson ultimately become?
Maybe the greatest coach of all time in NBA history, a multiple-time NBA champ. I want to say he won 9 rings during his time.
He won championships with different organizations.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And impacted, so if you look at Phil Jackson, now while John Wooden might have been arguably one of the greatest college basketball coaches, his student becomes the greatest. I would say would be the greatest NBA coach.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if he's coaching today, he'd probably go win another championship.
Yep.
And so,
No doubt.
and then you look at the players he impacted.
Oh yeah, I mean, he had two of the best players all time under him. I mean, Kobe and Jordan were both under Phil, I believe.
They were.
Yeah.
And gosh, think of all the other players. I mean,
Shaq was under him.
Shaq, Scotty. I mean, we can go through a list, Dennis Rodman. So
Dennis.
Here's a guy who understood teachability. I need to learn and grow. Matter of fact, if you were to ask John Maxwell today, who's the greatest leader of written leadership, he's written more about leadership than anybody. If you ask him who was his mentor, his main mentor, he'd say John Wooden.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what a great leader who teaches, he teaches others who teach.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at John Maxwell, he goes and says, well, John Wooden's my greatest leader. And yet you look at Maxwell today, how many leaders has he built? How many the leadership institutes around the world?
Absolutely,
the books,
yeah.
the influence. And so, but it all started because he was teachable.
Mm-hmm.
He was willing to learn. He didn't know it all because, John Maxwell met John Wooden when he's already grown up.
Mm-hmm.
And John Wooden was retired, and so Maxwell set out and how Maxwell ended up meeting with him is by following a process that I love to this day, a process that says everyone that I meet, he's like, I got a question for him. Who do you know that I should know?
Yep, I remember that quote.
And so it's kind of a simple but profound deal. Who do you know that I should know? And because he did that, he was, if I remember the story right, he was in California somewhere, I don't know if it was LA somewhere, and he's I think in his 40s then. And one of the guys he meets is he says, hey, who do you know I should know? He goes, well, I know John Wooden. And he goes, I'd like to meet him.
Yeah.
And so that's how that started.
It's funny, I actually brought that quote up yesterday talking with Marty on our sales team. Just saying, talk about new business. It's like, who are our suppliers and who do they know? And yeah, funny you bring that up.
Yeah. So I got a funny little story on teachability. Okay. Cause we talk about that in order to grow, in order to become the best you always have to have a mindset that is flexible and teachable. Mm-hmm. But I got a funny story that I want to share with you. And it's the story, it's called the bologna story. The bologna sandwich story.
Sounds good already. Yep.
It says 2 construction workers had taken a lunch break and opened up their lunch boxes. One of them looked inside his box and said, not a bologna sandwich again. I can't believe it. I hate bologna. This is the 3rd time this week I've had bologna. I can't stand bologna. The other one said, why don't you ask your wife to make you something different? He replied, leave my wife out of this. I made these myself. That is so true.
Yeah.
So true. That we go through life and we're like, hey, we're talking about this guy just in our own life, hey, tired of this bologna sandwiches. Well, what's the real issue?
Yeah, you made your bed. You know?
You're not willing to learn and change.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that's what I'm saying. Most people go through life not with a teachable mind. They go through life with a complaining mind. Mm-hmm. In a mind that says, hey, why are situations this way? Why are things not, changing? And ultimately they are changing. They're probably just changing for the worse. Why are they? Because they're not willing to grow and be teachable. They weren't, and teachability is required in humility. I was in a meeting this past week with our head of maintenance for our organization. Mm-hmm. The maintenance department is an important department, Matt.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If things don't run, nothing runs.
things not running, and keeping our equipment at top condition is critical for not just making products, but making it at the optimal level.
Yeah.
So the Sean Phillips is the head of our, department. Sean was with me years ago, left the organization and came back. Sean is a great guy. He reminded me in our meeting how he used to really enjoy when I would take Sean and other, guys up and kind of do a little leadership lesson class with him on a Monday. I forgot he was in that group. He was reminding me of that. But what I really enjoyed about the time with him and the whole maintenance team is looking at how they respond to Sean. Without mentioning names, when Sean left, previous people who took over that department, they were smart. They were smart people. But what they lacked was the desire or the commitment to grow their team and teach their team. And ultimately, that became a detriment to us. What I valued in that meeting was when I was sitting around, Sean talked about not just the standards that we should have, the higher standards. He talked about how he wants to see each one of their team members grow and how they grow and how he wants to play a role in teaching them. Well, I knew then by sitting in that meeting, we're a better organization today.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah, Sean's a great guy.
And I sat there and I listened to the other members on the maintenance team talk about what they want to learn. I had one guy over here saying, "Hey, I'm taking these classes over at Greenville Tech to learn to become basically a water treatment person."
Oh, okay.
I learned something. I didn't learn you had to go through so many levels of certification to be a water treatment person.
I wouldn't have known that.
I wouldn't have known it either. I mean, you got to make it to D level, B level, C level, A level, and each level is about a year.
Wow.
So Matt, let me tell you something. Being a water treatment person, that person has to have a lot of knowledge.
Oh yeah, and I'm glad they do.
Yeah. I don't want the job.
Yeah.
But I
I've smelled the water treatment plant before.
I have too. I got one. So but I respect. I'm like, wow, you got to go through basically 4 years to become a master water treatment person. That requires commitment.
Yeah.
And the ability to learn. Then I listened to some other guys talk about. I went around the room and asked them. I said, "Okay, tell me what you're best at." And what I heard consistently around the room is more mechanical stuff. We're mechanically oriented, in our strengths. But what I heard from a few other guys is, but I'm studying and learning electrical. And it's like, wow, that's great. I mean, that's a skill we need. Yeah. And so, learning electrical takes a teachable mind, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it's a lot of people's safety are in your hands. You've got to,
including your own.
Yeah, you've got to know how to do it right, and it takes a lot of learning to get it right.
And so I appreciate learning that because I don't want to mess with electrical.
I'm with you.
That is one that I just don't want to do. And so, but what I loved about being part of that group just this past week was, wow, what a group that wants to learn and grow. It's when you're around people that want to learn and grow, it's inspiring. Because I walked out saying, golly, I love this group. I want to give to this group. I want to help this group. I'm getting them some books to help them. I mean, it was just inspiring and energizing. Okay. It's no different than a teacher, who's in a classroom and she or he's teaching, and you can see this group of students, they want it. Leaders want those kind of people that want it. And so wrote down a verse in Ephesians. In Ephesians 4:23, to be made new in the attitude of your minds.
Okay.
To be made new in the attitude of your minds. Why did I write that down? I have heard, going back to this maintenance deal, I have heard over the last many, many months, maybe to a year, of the attitude of the maintenance department. The attitude. I'd often heard, these guys have a poor attitude. The group I met yesterday had a great attitude.
Good.
But they have a great attitude because now they have a good teacher.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't that they're not teachable. They just needed a good teacher.
Yeah. If you have a negative leader, you'll find a negative department right behind them.
Well, let me ask you this. When you look back in school, do you remember your most favorite teacher?
Yeah, I would say so. Mm-hmm.
I know I do.
Yeah.
It's when you look back and you say, okay, in your mind, who was your favorite teacher? Why were they your favorite teacher?
They were excited about sharing their knowledge is why.
And you felt they cared.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And so here's a statement that I love to share in leadership. People don't, I learned this statement, so I didn't make up this statement. People, they're not going to care, about what you have to say till they really know how much you care.
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee you, when you look back and say, my best teachers, I felt like they cared about me.
Yeah, and you can find your least favorite teachers.
You didn't think they cared about you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably had a few names to say about that teacher.
Indeed.
We all know the teachers are. I hope you don't get that one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I had those from a young age all the way through college.
Mm-hmm.
I hope we don't get that professor. That professor's mean and tough.
Mm-hmm.
But the ones that you knew who cared, well, you wanted those. You want to learn from this. It's no different. You want to be led by someone who cares.
Mm-hmm.
It's essential. You're drawn to that and you want to be that. So I got another story for you. Okay. So a young man named John received a parrot as a gift. The parrot had a bad attitude and even worse, a vocabulary. Sometimes parrots can pick up some pretty bad words.
Yeah, sailor's mouth.
Sailor's mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Every word out of the bird's mouth was rude, obnoxious, and laced with profanity. John tried to change the bird's attitude by consistently saying only polite words, playing soft music, and anything else he could think of to clean up the bird's vocabulary. Finally, John was fed up and he yelled at the parrot. The parrot yelled back. John shook the parrot and the parrot got angrier and even more rude. John, in desperation, threw up his hands, grabbed the bird, and put him in the freezer. For a few minutes, the parrot squawked and kicked and screamed. Then suddenly there was a total quiet. Not a peep was heard for over a minute. Fearing that he had hurt the parrot, John quickly opened the door to the freezer. The parrot calmly stepped out onto John's outstretched arms and said, I believe I may have offended you with my rude language and actions. I'm sincerely remorseful for my inappropriate transgressions, and I fully intend to do everything I can to correct my rude and unforgivable behavior. John was stunned at the change in the bird's attitude. As he went about to ask the parrot what had made such a dramatic change in his behavior, the bird spoke up very softly. May I ask what the turkey did? So sometimes to get the mind to a teachable mind, you sometimes need a little bit of drastic action and change.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, Matt, sometimes I can be stubborn. And stubbornness in itself can be a good thing in many ways. It can be, hey, I'm going to be stubborn. I'm going to fight for, what I believe. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to be stubborn. You're not just going to push me over. But stubbornness also can get into our way of teachability. It's like when our children get stubborn sometimes, right?
Yeah, they can't. Those two things can't coexist.
Yeah, they and when a child, I was just laughing. My daughter, she was sending me. We were doing this morning actually. So I was talking with her, and she was sending me videos of my son when he was younger. And I guess Julie decided to video when he was acting up.
Yeah, we do that with
and one of them was my son acting up. Gosh, he couldn't have been 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And the dog Sammy had eaten a book that obviously Drew cared about.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, he just acted out. And Julie's filming this thing, doing a countdown for him, and doing it. And so Claire was loving loving doing that. And then there was another one when they were sitting at the dinner table, and Julie's hitting Drew on something, and Drew's having to go through a teachable moment. But what was even funnier to me is I look over in the camera, and there's little Claire just blowing bubbles into her.
Yep.
And so, I mean, often when we get stubborn, it's hard to be teachable. And when our children, sometimes when we go through that and they're stubborn and we have to do things and discipline as a parent. And so that's the same way with us. That's the same way many times in my life and in leadership. There are times where I've been stubborn, or, that I, forced a deal or said something I didn't really mean. And you got to come back, in that humility and say, hey, maybe I was wrong here. Maybe I, didn't listen enough. And so that's going back to that listening is critical to teaching, because we all learn from each other. And so, as much as, like I said, that having a teachable heart is so much about growth. Teachability, and accountability is critical if you want to be someone who leads an uncommon life. Uncommon life people who are committed to be uncommon, are all about growing to the next level. And you can't grow if you can't learn. And so for me, I always want to have a lifelong process of learning and growing. I mean, it's why I love to come to this podcast and not just share on these ideas. I come and talk about books, right?
Mm-hmm.
I come in and share, hey, here's what I've learned in a book. And because I know that's critical to me, in order to give, I got to receive this information. So I think teachability is something that is probably one of the most important things in a person's life.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't ever want to stop being that. And I know you're the same way, Matt.
Yeah, I am. You mentioned being teachable is incredibly important for growth, and listening is how you get there. What would you say is one simple step our listeners could take to become more teachable today?
So one simple step is you need to wake up every day humble.
Mm-hmm.
You need to wake up with a mind that says, I have a new day. And in my day, that I have an opportunity to learn something. It's the old saying that I heard, I don't know if there's a teacher or mentor, but I heard every day you should be able to go to bed having learned something new.
Mm-hmm.
And so waking up with a humble mind and realize today is a day of opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have that mindset, that means you have a teachable mind.
Thanks for joining us today on the Uncommon CEO podcast. Subscribe to our show wherever you get podcasts. We have video episodes on our YouTube channel and more uncommon wisdom on our social media. Find all our links and resources at uncommonceopodcast.com. For Andrew Smart and all of us here at the Uncommon CEO, stay uncommon.